Okay, so if I was to ask you who the strongest earthbender of all time was, you'd probably say Toph, right?
I am the greatest earthbender in the world. Don't you two dunderheads ever forget it.
And if I was to ask you who the strongest non-bender of all time was, you'd argue between Ty Lee and maybe Pian Dao. But what about the many other categories in Avatar? Who's the strongest and smartest in all of them? But today, to figure this out, we're going to go through the many insanely powerful characters in both The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra and pick out only the best and most powerful in each of these 11 categories. We'll be finding the absolute smartest to the absolute strongest benders, non-benders, scientists, and more. But first, we must mention that for this video there is but one rule in place, just to make things that much more interesting. The rule is that you can only pick a character once. So that of course means that if we pick Aang as our airbender, we can't have him as our avatar. It's a simple rule, but one that makes things a hell of a lot more interesting in my opinion. So now with all of that said and without wasting any more of your time, let's begin with who we think is the all-around best waterbender to have ever existed. Now right off the bat, I got Prime Katara in contention as the best waterbender of all time. Because yes, while she may not be as skilled as some of the other waterbenders in talents such as bloodbending, she is by far one of the most reliable and consistent benders in both The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra. Hell, she gave a seasoned waterbending veteran master like Paku a run for his money when she was little more than a novice bender herself. And also, let's not forget that she was renowned as the best healer of all time during The Legend of Korra. She's fought countless strong benders and came out the winner. She's smart, loyal, and like I said, above all, just insanely powerful. So we gotta give her credit where credit's due. Sure, you could argue Amon, Turlock, or any of the other powerful bloodbenders are of course stronger than her, and I would agree with you, but because bloodbending is its own category, I'm holding off on claiming any of them as better than Katara in terms of waterbending. So as it stands, and with the lack of any other powerful waterbender even contesting Katara's position, Katara's just gotta be the best waterbender to have ever existed, at least in my opinion. But now while we're on the topic, let's discuss bloodbending and decide who out of the many broken bloodbenders is truly the best. Now I've managed to narrow it down to Amon, Terlock, and Yakon, the strongest bloodbending family of all time. Now first off, Terlock is incredibly strong, and compared to anyone who isn't a bloodbender or an avatar, he'd easily win most if not all the matchups. But when compared to monsters like Amon or Yakon, he's absolutely nothing. So let's just sack him off for now. So that of course leaves us with Amon and his dad Yakon. Now Yakon displayed some of the strongest psychic bending of all time against Aang and the council members during his court appearance. But Amon's ability to become straight up immune to blood bending and his ability to remove others' bending, including Avatar's bending such as Korra, places him easily above all others in this category. So as it stands, I got Amon as the strongest and just overall best bloodbender of all time. And I really don't think that's a controversial opinion to have. So now let's quickly just move on to firebending. Now similar to the bloodbenders, this tends to stay in the family, as the three characters that I have in contention for the title of the best is Fire Lord Ozai, his brother Iroh, and Azula, that psycho bitch that will really fuck you up. Ozai of course was named the strongest firebender of all time during The Last Airbender, but Iroh was and is still widely believed to be the stronger of the two. He's just also someone who could never bring himself to fight his own little brother in battle. Both however display strong fire and lightning bending abilities throughout all of The Last Airbender. But Iroh's redirecting ability allowed Zuko to momentarily gain an upper hand against Ozai himself during their confrontation. So you could of course argue that Iroh would have the slight edge in battle just for that ability alone. But don't get me wrong, in terms of destructive and decisive ability, very few actually come close to either of these two monsters in combat. So you could of course argue for either one of them being better than the other. But when we're talking about the most perfect all-around firebender of all time, it's very hard not to have Azula claim that title. Like of course no one's claiming her to be stronger than either Ozai or Iroh. But for her to have achieved something like the Blue Flames, just in my opinion places her levels above anyone else in the firebending category. Like her flames were named the most perfect form of firebending to have ever been created. So how could we not place Azula as the best firebender to have ever existed? We simply can't. So Azula takes the role of the best firebender of all time on this list. But now up next, let's just quickly cover the best lightning bender in Avatar. Which of course, right off the bat, Azula would be perfect for this slot as well, if not for the fact that we just used her in the firebending slot. And as was stated earlier in the video, our rule of course prevents us from using the same character twice, so we of course can't have Azula. So that means it's got to be someone who we haven't used yet, and someone who has been shown to be incredibly powerful in that ability. Now immediately this brings two characters and two incredible scenes to mind. First is of course Fire Lord Ozai and the scene of him attacking Aang with one of the strongest lightning bolt attacks that I have ever seen. Sure, this was easily redirected by Aang during that fight, but it was still one of, if not the strongest lightning attack in all of Avatar. The only other lightning attack that I can think of that even comes close to this was Maku's use of lightning to destroy Kuvira's spirit core. Now as you just saw, both are insanely strong lightning benders, but which of them is the best? Well, in terms of destruction and power, I'd easily give it to Ozai, but in terms of sheer mastery of the ability, I'd have to give it to Maku, because out of the two benders, he's the only one that can successfully send out and redirect lightning attacks. Which means if they were in a battle of just lightning bending abilities, Maku would surely take the victory over Ozai, because like I said, he has Iroh's ability to redirect lightning. So yeah, I have Maku as the strongest lightning master in all of Avatar. But now up next, let's cover earthbending, with our picks for this category being King Bumi, Kuvira, and of course the self-proclaimed best earthbender of all time, Toph.
I am the greatest earthbender in the world! Don't you two dunderheads ever forget it!
Now simply because I plan to use Kuvira later on in the video, I can't have her as the strongest earthbending master on this list. Because of course we can only use her once and I plan to use her again later. So we're just going to have to erase her from contention for now, which of course leaves Toph and King Bumi. Now despite his age, King Bumi was always a force to be reckoned with, even giving Toph a run for her money in the Lost Adventures comic, where they fought a 1v1 to decide which of them is the strongest. Now of course that 1v1 ended a bit abruptly, so we never really got a clear-cut answer on which of them was the strongest, at least from the creator's point of view. But given Toph's vast knowledge on all things earthbending and her many skilled subcategories in the art, I'm just going to have to give her the edge between the two. So as it stands, I got Toph as the best earthbender of all time, and I don't think many of you would disagree with that answer. Now to quickly move right along, with the blind bandit aka Toph Beifong taking the earthbending slot, she can't of course become our metal bender. But that's okay, because as I mentioned earlier, we have someone who I consider one of the best all-around benders in the entire series to fill that gap that was left by Toph. It's Kuvira. Kuvira and her talents in metal bending are second only to Toph. She's outskilled and outfought almost every other earthbender in the series at one point or another, and even made avatars like Korra look like absolute shit when they fought a fair few times. So yeah, I just think her place as the metal bending master on this list is an easy and fairly obvious one, due to the fact that she is just simply unmatched in that entire category. Now up next, we of course have airbending, with Jinora and Sahir as our contenders. Now Jinora at the age of 11 displayed incredible control over both airbending and spiritual projection. In fact, she was the youngest ever recorded airbending master, becoming one at only age 11, a whole year younger than Aang was when he claimed his tattoos at the age of 12. She's incredibly skilled, and if not for Sahir, she could easily claim the title as the best airbending master of all time. But it's because of Sahir and his airbending time frame that Aang and Jinora seem like total wankers in the art. Because this guy gained his powers, mastered them, and developed the ability to fly in little more than a month. Which, don't get me wrong, is easily one of the stupid and most unexplained things to have ever come out of the Legend of Korra, but is one that just can't be overlooked when picking out the best airbender of all time. Because it's this time frame that almost forces us to place Sahir as the best airbender to have ever lived. Like, the guy mastered everything about the art in a fucking month, for God's sake. No one else has done that or even come close to that. He's simply built different. So yeah, Sahir takes the airbending slot on this list. But now with that said, let's quickly move over to energy bending, with avatars Aang and Korra as our contenders. Now Aang learning and using this ability to end the century-long war at the age of only 12 easily has us leaning in his direction. But Korra uses this ability to beat one of the strongest foes of all time, Batu. So of course she just can't be overlooked. Like, don't get me wrong, I am of course a massive Aang fanboy, and will always claim him stronger and better than Korra. But even I have to admit that when it comes to the use of energy bending, Korra just does it better. Like, all Aang ever really did with that ability was remove certain people's bending and subsequently end a war. Whereas Korra, on the other hand, not only used it to end many a war, but also used it to send out a massive astral projection of herself to fight Fatu, the evil avatar. Like, that sheer control and mastery over the art needs to be mentioned and needs to be respected. So as much as it pains me not to have Aang as the best energy bender, it's just gotta be Korra. She easily outmasters Aang in this art. But now with that out of the way, let's move on to the best non-bender of all time, which I've discovered over my time as an Avatar fan tends to be the most controversial debate of them all. Like, many claim Ty Lee as the strongest and best all-around non-bender of all time, because she's quick, agile, and possesses the extremely strong chi blocking technique that no one else has. But many others also back the experience of Piandao, the greatest swordsman in the entire Avatar world. Now, I've always been one that leans towards the latter half of this debate. I believe experience trumps skill every single time. But when talking about the best all-around non-bender in the Avatar world, is it really Piandao, or even Ty Lee? I just don't think so. Because remember, we also have the likes of the Equalists, more specifically, their lieutenant, the Lieutenant. He's extremely skilled in combat, having only ever been bested because of the shock of Amon's reveal. Like, before all of that shit, no one ever really came close to defeating him in combat. No metal bending officer or avatar like Korra. He was basically unbeatable for a non-bender. Like, in my opinion, he's got the experience of Piandao, but the skills of Ty Lee, paired with an extreme anger and determination for victory that no one else in the series has. Which is why I have him ranked as the best non-bender of all time. His modern technology and sheer combat capabilities, just in my opinion, makes him better overall. But now with that said, let's quickly discuss the smartest and overall best scientist in the world of Avatar. Because remember, technology plays a very important role in both series and deserves mentioning, even if it is just briefly. Now right off the bat, I just want to cover the man who brought technology to life in the Avatar world, the Mechanist. The Mechanist was responsible for some of the greatest feats of technology in The Last Airbender, being the man who created things such as the Fire Nation drill, the supply truck, the hot air balloon, and the Eclipse sunglasses. Okay, that last one kinda sucks, but you get my point. He's basically the founder and daddy of invention in the Avatar universe, and deserves mentioning just for that alone. But realistically, the man that we have claiming the title as the best scientist of all time just has to be Hiroshi Sato, the man who brought cars, planes, weapons, and robots to the world of Avatar. Like, in terms of technology evolution, Hiroshi Sato took the path the Mechanist laid out in front of him and ran across it. The man is a genius by every meaning of the word, so he's just gotta claim that spot as the best scientist on our list. But now let's end off with yet another very controversial topic: the best Avatar to have ever existed. Now for this, we're of course going to be picking the best Avatar, not just the strongest or the one who achieved the most. Of course those factors will be included, but this will be somebody who maintained the balance between two worlds to a higher standard than any other Avatar that came before them. So with that said, that immediately takes Avatars Korra and Karuk out of contention, because they both fucked with the balance far worse than anyone else in the Avatar world. Now the two we've managed to narrow it down to is Kyoshi and Aang, because there's no question that these were the two that took the role as the protector of balance the most seriously. Like, Aang, despite being a child, followed the destiny laid out in front of him and freed the world from a century-long war. And Kyoshi, of course, much in the same way, killed Shin the Conqueror and granted the world a time of peace that they never had seen before. Sure, with them both being renowned avatars, they're extremely powerful, and honestly, both are potentially the most powerful avatars of all time. But only one of them can claim the title as the best avatar. And for this, even though I'm someone who strongly believes Kyoshi is stronger than Aang in almost every way, I'm someone who also sees Aang's connection to both worlds as unmatched by anyone else in the series. Except for maybe Iroh, but he's the GOAT. Like, that's not really a fair comparison to make. So yeah, when we're talking in terms of the best avatar of all time, not the strongest but the best, I just gotta go with Aang. Because he's just simply the all-around more reliable avatar than any of the others, at least in my opinion. But now there you have it. The best, the smartest, and the strongest characters in every single category that I can think of. Do you agree with our picks or do you disagree with any of them? Tell me all that down below in the comments. And while you're there, why not give us a like on today's video? It really helps us out a lot and I would really appreciate it. But now with all of that out of the way, have a great day or night wherever you are, and peace.